Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Diary of a CIO. I am Sarah Pawson from Fruition Consulting, and I am delighted to welcome our guest today, Jock Carruthers. So, hi, Jock. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Very good. Thank you. So, Jock has held a number of technology C-level roles for organisations, including your current role at Uni Pizzas and other roles that you've held at Asda, Bupa and Lloyds. And the cat's out the bag that you're very soon going to be joining Marks and Spencer's as their CTO of delivery, which is an exciting role for you. What I liked about some of the things on your LinkedIn profile is that you're used to working in an always-on world. So I'm really looking forward to chatting to what the demands pose working in that type of environment. You keep yourself busy personally with your hobbies, which include playing golf, visiting your house up in the Highlands, 2 dogs, and your son who has now off doing his own thing, who's 24. So bit of an intro to you, Jock. So I'm going to just ask a big, wide question to get us started on today's podcast. When did you know you wanted to be a CIO, and what was the biggest kind of risk or chance you had to take to get there?
A great question. I don't think I ever thought I wanted to be a CIO, if I'm being brutally honest. I fell into technology, and I'll be honest, purely mercenary. I started in business, so I worked in banking and worked my way through their ranks from a branch to helping out selling mortgages, financial advice, etc., etc. And a graduate scheme popped up to say technology or retail banking. And I asked what the difference is, and ultimately it came down to about £7,000. So technology was chosen. What I didn't understand, though, it meant moving from Paisley to Halifax, which was a bit of a move for me, and hence ended up down south. But ultimately, as I worked in technology, I always had a good grasp of technology, but I knew I wasn't a technologist. I wasn't I could code. I wasn't somebody who was deep, technical. I was always more business aligned and trying to work with the business to get outcomes and leveraging technology to do that. So that's how I ended up in technology. And then as I moved up through the ranks, I saw there's a leadership element to technology, and ultimately that leadership elements come through as a CIO or a CTO, which then I aimed for, to be fair, and worked me through to get there. So it wasn't original career destination, but so glad I'd made that decision, and I've enjoyed it ever since.
And was there a kind of a big risk that you had to take? Was it just that big decision of the kind of business route or the technology route, or I'm assuming there's been some other sliding doors moments along the way?
It was probably going into a field that I had no experience in or no background. I didn't do any technology degrees. I didn't do anything computer science or anything like that. So I'd never really been a programmer or in my bedroom coding or anything like that. So it was a leap into the unknown on what does technology mean? Because back then, God, when did I move into tech? It would have been 96, 97. It was still like core COBOL screen programming. It was pretty heavy, and I was like, this just isn't for me. But that was probably the biggest thing, is because I do talk too much. I'm quite a people person, and the image of technology was not quite that sociable side of it. But luckily, technology's changed over the years. And that's what's allowed us to be ourselves. And I've managed to thrive through it. So I would say the biggest risk was going into the unknown. It literally was the unknown.
Yeah. So look, we know that any C-level role is demanding, it's fair to say. And I think looking at some of the organisations that you've worked for and are going to be working for in the future, sort of retail, FMCG businesses, retail banking, that kind of always-on world that you refer to makes, I guess, the C-level role even more demanding. How do you balance kind of professional working life with personal life and home life and getting that right, or don't you balance it?
Well, I think early on in my career, the balance wasn't there. It was work. It was work. You just accepted that's how it was. Again, going back to when I started in my career in technology, there was an expectation that you're always there. There was no really things called flexible working or working from home or, you know, taking time. It was, you know, you worked and you were on call. So when you finished at 6 o'clock at night, you were on call through the next morning. And then if you were up through the night, you were expected to still be in. I have vivid memories of calling hotlines and leaving recorded messages for the execs to dial into to hear what had happened overnight, and you were expected to be in the morning to tell them. So initially, I think the culture wasn't really there about balancing work life, but I was really, really fortunate to have some great bosses and great leaders that I worked for who role modelled that there was always time for the family. So if, you know, school runs or dentists or appointments or weekends, you know, as long as you'd cover and there was somebody they knew who they could contact, then that was acceptable. And that was the real lesson, was you only put that pressure on yourself. And as long as there's a contingency there that somebody is available and is always on, that you can, you know, you don't have to be looking at your phone 24/7. And it's been clear as well about expectations on how you can be contacted. You know, the good old explosion of mobile phones, you were constantly looking at your phone going, oh, is there an email or is there a text message or is there a Slack message or whatever, so ready to respond to. And it was, again, learning through others and mirroring is, again, through great leaders where, well, if you need me, you'll call me. So I'm not going to have my phone stuck to my hand looking for a message or a text message. Like, I'll expect a phone call and then I know it's urgent and then I'll answer. So there was that element of personally going, set your boundaries, set how it's going to work, put it in place. But then the flip side is trust your team. I mean, we do pay people to be on call. We do pay people to work night shifts and through, you know, 24/7 ops, etc. And it's trusting them to do their job as much as your own, and then taking a wee bit of a step back to get time. Because you can't always be always on. It's nigh on impossible. You burn out too quick. You make rash decisions.
And when did you learn that element of self-control to sort of put a stop to always being there and always being available? Because that's a big lesson that you've got to learn at some stage of your career.
Lifestyle, life changes. I had my son really early. I was 25, and balancing that I wanted to be there for him and do things with my son. And it was, again, I was really fortunate again that I had some great leaders and great bosses who understood that, you know, if you'd been a female in tech or in any other business, there was maternity leave, you had time off. I mean, when I started, I think paternity leave was a week, and that was it. There was no sort of boundaries. It was like, you know, straight back into work. But as I said, I had some great, you know, people that allowed you, as long as you were clear what you wanted to do and how you wanted to do it. And I always remember a great boss of mine, a lady called Penny Hutchinson, who allowed us to have time. You know, if we said, well, what do the school run? A Tuesday afternoon, I'm going to go out and do that. And another guy was full tenny. Like, yeah, you could go Thursday at 3, leave the office, pick him up, take him home, get him sorted, log back on again, and, you know what, catch your hours up later in the evening. That was acceptable. And that was the start of this approach we do now about it's output driven rather than time driven. You know, that constant be here was about how you out, and as long as you were delivering outputs and available when they needed you, then yeah, it worked well. So it was a life change. To be honest, would I change without having my son? Probably not, because I wouldn't have had that click to go, I want this force and I want this change. But that can be for any reason. You don't have to have children to make those decisions. And unfortunately now, I think the culture in technology and any other part of the business, it's becoming a bit more norm and it's acceptable. Yeah,
no, it's very true. You talked about, it sounds like you've had some quite influential managers in your career. And you also mentioned, I saw this online somewhere, the importance of being a role model yourself, but particularly when you're trying to embed cultural change or make a difference. What's been the impact of a mentor or a leader, one of your managers, on your career today? Is there anybody that really stands out? You mentioned Penny and Phil Tenney. Is there anyone that stands out, and why?
I think there's an amalgamation of a few. So you always take, I've moved about my career, you know, every 5-6 years move to do a different role, and you always learn from who you work for and work with. And I've been fortunate that the majority, if not all, have been great, and I've always taken something away from them. And I think that's the key, is don't try and be somebody else. Like, don't try and be Phil, don't try and be Penny, you know, be you, be authentic, be who you are. But take what they do well and what you can see can go well on it, you know, how they act, how they spot. And I will go way back to early in my career. Sir Archie Norman was part of a group that bought a small startup. I was part of Planet Online in Leeds, and he used to come up and walk the floor and talk to everybody. It doesn't matter if he was the security guard, the cleaner, the engineer, whatever. He knew he was so personable. But he's up here, you know, as a young man. I was like, God, he's like up here. But he was a person, and I think that's the hardest thing to get your head around as you're moving up through the ranks. It doesn't matter how senior an individual is; they're still a person. They're still a human. Yeah. And once you connect with that human being, then you kind of take what they do and how they do it well and how you adapt it. So, you know, going back to your answer, no one specific person, but everybody has had an influence on me and how I work. And I want to do that back again. I mean, I'm probably not your traditional CTO, West of Scotland, kind of sort of council estate, grew up, you know, that sort of, not had that massive career aspirations of where I want to be. I've just kind of worked there through hard work. I always say it's more hard work than ability, but I always think I've had the ability to be connect at a human level, which helps, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you're doing, there's somebody always at the other end of it, either a consumer, a customer, a colleague, team member, a bot. So as long as you've got a connection to what that individual is and what they're trying to do, you can kind of adapt it to the way you work. And that's what it is. But yeah, going back again to your question, what the biggest thing to take away is be you, and don't be scared to make mistakes. That was the biggest thing I learned off all of them. They were quite happy to make a decision, as long as it was a decision tree and they understood why they made the decision. If it was the wrong decision, well, the assumptions were wrong, but at least you could point back to what it was based on and not try to know everything. That was the other thing. Use the people around you and use your contacts. I mean, that was a huge lesson I learned, that you don't have to be the cleverest person in the room every time and have every answer ready. It's like, use who's around you. Be authentic. Not everybody can know everything, and it's the skill is knowing who does know that answer, and then be able to contact them and walk through in your own pace about, that's the outcome that we desire, and how do we get there. Yeah, it's interesting, because I mean, I've done 6 or 7 of these podcasts now, and every single person has said to me, oh, I didn't want to be a CIO. I didn't set out to be a CIO. That was never part of my plan. But through, I guess, hard work, a lot of it was about hard work and determination and a desire to do their very best has kind of put them in a position to get there. So there's definitely some common ground there. So I guess reflecting then a little bit over your career and some of the decisions that you've made, what is the one thing that you would have done differently if you could have that time again? That is a hard question. The one thing, I'm not going to say I don't have any sort of regret or any one thing I would do again, because every time I've done something, and if it hasn't worked out, it's been a lesson, and it's something I've taken away to learn from it. And I'm kind of, it sounds really corny, what I'm going to say, be the best you can be from any situation. But I think it's key. You learn through mistakes and you learn through error, and that gives you this sort of second sense that I've been in this situation before. I knew what I did last time. It didn't work out. Why? Right. Mm-hmm. In this situation again, apply a different, thought process or a different, logic. Do we have a different outcome? Yes, go for it. So I think that a lot of the critical learning for me was through failure, and I did make mistakes on the way through. But I think one of the key things was I was never afraid to make a decision, because I always knew something would happen. And then I think that's helped elevate me, because death by paralysis is worse than making a decision and being wrong. Because at least you're moving forward. I think, a lot of times you're struggling to move back. But what's the biggest lesson that you've learned then? Slightly different way of phrasing the question. That's a great way to rephrase it. Biggest lesson I learned is, do not judge a book by its cover. I've worked with some people where I have been amazed by their capability and capacity, but misrepresented them by their first impression, by how they spoke to me, or the general demeanour. But once you get to know who they are and understand their drivers, oh my God! And if you can unlock that potential they've got on their driver, where they want to be, it's phenomenal. And I guess that's again something you learn as you get older and as you go through it. yeah, everybody talks about first impressions, but really you shouldn't make big decisions on first impressions. And it's a human business again, after all. Tech, I know it's technology, but there's always people at the end of the keyboard, people doing things, making the decisions. And once you understand who they are, you've got a powerful tool at your hands to help the organisation and itself and them go forward. So yeah, that was the biggest lesson, was don't make initial judgments. Build it over time, understand who they are and what makes sense, and then you're off and running.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really good nuggets of advice there in terms of that. That's a great lesson, and I liked what you said about getting decisions made is really important. And I always talk about done is better than perfect, and people look at me amazed, but actually getting things done is so much more important. How have you seen the role of kind of CIO, CTO change and evolve, particularly over the last, maybe 5 years, particularly since COVID, which has changed the ways in which we work? But how have you seen those changes?
Actually, I think in the simplistic form, it is the CIO, CTO role is now so much more seen as a partner and as a strategic enabler, rather than maybe an order taker. So where the business has probably, been in the past, be very clear where it needs to go, because let's just say technology maybe wasn't a differentiator early days, whereas I think technology now definitely can be leveraged hard as a competitive advantage. The stuff that's not going to be competitive, don't overthink it. The stuff that you can make a big, change in your sector and in your area of expertise, that's when you want to leverage that competitive advantage in tech. And I think the key role now of a CTO, CIO is how you harness that, and also being able to go, right, you don't need a Rolls Royce right now for this solution. It's a Mini Cooper. Or conversely, do you need 9.9s? You might think you do, but do you? And it's really, for me, it's translating the business strategy into the appropriate technology outcomes to help them get the competitive advantage. And I think that's key. Now, I think a lot of CIOs, CTOs I have in the past struggled to build that credibility when you first come into a role. Is like, you're new, you don't know who's really been there before you, and are you going to be a trusted partner that can have a view and challenge, or are you just going to say, right, they want 9.9s or they want X or they want Y, I'll go and deliver it and just deliver an outcome, rather than being part of the solution and helping get to that. I think it should always start though, technology is an enabler. Technology should never be the business. The business has things. But once you understand technology and what it can do, and but more powerfully understand what the business wants and where it wants to go. For example, in retail stores, it might be a frictionless experience to the customer, because one of the biggest pain points for a customer may be time. A mother, family, kids, they don't want to spend an hour in a supermarket. So our business outcome to get more people to come to the supermarket may be, how do we make that journey quicker, frictionless? And it's then using your head and going, right, technology, as a CTO, CIO, how can I help with that? Mobile apps, self-checkout, beaconing, whatever it might be. That's when you start bringing your insight into what they can do. Whereas anything I'll call it non-competitive, will again being confident saying, well, we'll build it, we'll buy it, sorry, not build it. We'll go to your Magic Quadrants and build in your SAPs or your Blue Yonders or whatever, who can just do what we need in the core, do it really well, and don't try and reinvent the wheel. So I think it's evolved sort of that way.
And how do you, so it's kind of key that it's a business partnering role, and you've got to really understand the business to be able to, I guess, ensure technology enables what the business needs to do. How, as a CIO, do you go from a Lloyd's to a Bupa to an Asda to an Uni Pizza? There's some similarities in those sectors, but there's some key differences, and really get to understand that business quickly to be able to add value in that role. How do you do that?
Literally spending time in the business. I mean, the induction or carving out time, he's moving into M&S, for example, they're going to put me 5-6 weeks in stores, depots, satellite sites. Understand that. Asda, we did the same. We went out, spent time in depots, stores, and really understood the business. In banking, Lloyd's, in Halifax, in Bank of Scotland, where it was, I used to be in the business. I started as a cashier and worked my way up. So I had that business insight to come into technology. And that stuck with me, is like, once you understand the pain point and the person sat on the chair using the software or using the technology, delivering to try and deliver something to a customer, then you've got an advantage because you kind of understand the pain points. So yeah, it's finding the time, to be honest, Sarah, to go and understand the business and spending time with them and articulating the need, because it is challenging. People have calls on your time and want you to do something else, but it's then articulating back saying, well, actually, the bigger benefit in the long term will be, give me the 2 weeks sat in the store, stacking shelves on a till, you know, doing all the roles a colleague would do, and helps do that. And again, I've been, you know, lucky, fortunate, in all the places I've been and gone in, is they've understood that, and either they've sponsored it straight off the bat and told me that's what they want me to do, or when I've asked to do it, they supported it and said, yeah, of course, go and do that and spend time with them. And that's the same in, you know, head office functions. We kind of forget that sometimes. It's like, we'll go and sit in the finance team in a month end and see what it's like, or go and sit with, you know, a people team when it's annual pay reviews or bonus days or whatever it is, and see what they go through, or, you know, that sort of thing. I think there's real value there.
So putting that time in early on is really critical. Yeah.
And revisit and revising it and revisit, because things change, you know, as you develop. And I always think that's a good thing with big program and change delivery is, you know, when you go back in after you've done it and actually see, is it done what you thought it would do, or is it create more problems? You know, go and actually see what's basically happened.
And as a CTO, you've been working for Uni Pizzas more recently, which must be, you know, really innovative, newish brand now that, particularly after COVID, every household needed a pizza oven. What are the kind of things that keep you up at night as a CIO in that environment, but also in kind of your bigger, larger corporate environments like Marks and Spencer's? What's your headache?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that career choice was all driven by that. I'd never done startup, scale up, and cool products, and so that was a major attraction for me to leave the corporate world, I'll let you ask this, but again, I'm going back to M&S. So I think the common theme, and I'm sure you've heard it from all of us, is cyber. So cyber landscape is ever changing. It used to be you could kind of understand the drivers, and it was usually financial gain. So if somebody was just trying to get money out of you or disrupt your business to extort something. Now with the geopolitical landscape, you don't know what's going on. You know, people aren't, what's the method, what's the madness, why are they doing it? And it makes it harder then to stay one step ahead. Or, you know, if God forbid something did happen to the organisation it was in, is how do you combat it? You know, because that when it's financial gain, you kind of know, well, at the end of the day, if I've got, you know, insurance and I've got this, I've got that, we can, you know, do what we need to do and get the information back or unlock whatever they blocked or whatever. Now you just don't know what they're after, and I think cyber's such a big concern, because it's ever, as I said, it's ever changing. Everything, people get more sophisticated. You know, it's not necessarily the hack anymore. It's like, you know, people. You know, it's like bad actors, all that sort of stuff. So that's a constant threat, and that's been across all the sectors I've worked in. And unique ones, I think. And I think corporate is also picking this up now, is workforce. And it's about how do we continue to attract talent into an industry that is changing and constantly changing. I mean, if you think there's a workforce before, was it 2019? Nobody knew what it would like to be in the office 5 days a week, 4 days a week. Anybody who was hired post 2019 COVID doesn't know what it's like to be in the office necessarily 5 days a week, you know. And it's about that workforce, about how do we ensure that they are getting everything we got being in the office through mentoring, watching, shadowing, that old 70-20-10 learning experience, you know, 70% on your job, 20% watching what's going around you, shadowing, and 10% formal. What we've got today is nobody's in the office as much, so there's that gap in this middle bit of just what's going on. And everybody knows technology is so fast and changing and evolving. It's like, well, how do we get that workforce skilled? How do we act, and how do we retain them? Because it's constant challenge everywhere. And so I think that's quite unique. It was unique in startup. How do you persuade people to join you in a scaling business rather than a kind of like well-established corporate? But I think now the corporates are facing into the same thing about coming back into the office. We want you in now 2 days, 3 days a week. Well, I'm used to working remotely. And it's like, how do you, what's the benefits? How do you persuade a workforce to do that when there's others who maybe aren't and they want to go somewhere else? So I think that's, cyber overall, but I think the newish one, but I think it's bleeding across both industries, is workforce. How do you keep them? How do you maintain them? How do you train them and keep them growing with you? Because there is a massive advantage just listening and seeing and watching and experience. And I personally, might be wrong, think some of that's lost when you're sat on your own in your own home, where you're not collaborating as much.
Yeah, I mean, if you think, that learning through osmosis has been removed for so many roles, and it's, particularly with the kind of the junior end of, people coming into entry level roles that don't get that exposure to people that are inexperienced, seasoned technology professionals. It's almost like there's this gap, this ever widening gap.
And I still generally will call on experiences in my early career now to make decisions and help influence what I'm trying to do. And that was all through, as I said before, like, leaders and bosses and colleagues you work with, you just watch what they're doing and they're so clever, and you pick these little things up, and it's just, something you don't think is relevant then, 5 years down the line, suddenly, right, now I know why that was, why that happened and why it actually played out. So yeah, I think you're spot on about that environment. And
thinking about those challenges, if we take, cyber as a threat to a business as a CIO, which has been a common theme from everybody that we've spoken to, every single CIO has said that is their biggest challenge. How do you, as an individual, make sure you're equipped to deal with that? So how do you broaden your knowledge and experience to give yourself the best fighting chance of dealing with that, and also facing off at board level to being able to answer questions and coming up with solutions for that?
Yeah, it's really insightful. I think first and foremost is to understand you're not alone, and I'm a big believer in calling in help. I mean, there's especially when you're working in large corporates, there is experts in the field. I mean, when I was at Walmart, their cyber teams were just humongous, so we called on them a lot from Asda and understanding. And it's about not trying to be on your own. It's that whole collaborative help, and trying to stay ahead is nigh on impossible. So what it's about is the controls. So what can we do to sort of give us the best fighting chance that actually we're a bit harder to impact than somebody else because our controls are slightly stronger. So an easier target, awful to say it, might be somebody else. So they go that way rather than coming after yourself. So I think a lot of that for me is, is about understanding what your controls, basic stuff that we've all done over the past, multi-factor authentication, making sure we've got processes and lockdowns, good lever process, privilege accounts, all the stuff that everybody could rhyme off. But also, I think there's a real rigor around risk and risk management and risk acceptance at that board level, the C-suite level, is to be able to say, this is our situation, this is what we are, this is what could happen to us, and this is what we're doing to mitigate it. Are you comfortable with that? And are you happy with it? Because you don't necessarily have to fix everything, as long as you have strong mitigation in place that negates the need to fix it as such. But yeah, I think in the other thing on that whole risk side is being able to articulate it clearly what it means to the business. There's nothing stronger. Like, for example, an internal audit is my best friend, and I've used them over the years for that, because they all highlight control weaknesses, and then the impact of such weaknesses. So it allows you to maybe fast track business cases to get funded to get things fixed. And I think that's critical, because again, be able to articulate to a board level of what could happen and be able to really be clear about it. Fines, for example, from the information committee, if your data is lost, well, could you afford 4% global loss on your revenue? It's a lot of money if you're a big corporate. So therefore, we should look to do something. So roundabout way to answer your question is try and make it hard as possible. You can never stop it, I don't think, full stop, but try and put as much control in place with the appropriate mitigation, so you're not seen as a soft target and somebody goes somewhere else. And really working with the larger workforce as well for the human controls, really ensure that is buttoned down, because that's also one of the biggest threat factors, is somebody just, you know, leaving their passwords in a paper or ID badge so somebody can get into the building. You know, it's the sort of basic stuff, but yeah, it's real.
Yeah, that's really good advice, and I've asked everyone a question about cyber, but never really delved into, well, what can you do about it? What are the kind of steps at a high level, that maybe someone might not have, lots of things that people would have thought about. But what else is there that you can do? Befriending the internal auditor sounded like.
And also hire a CISO next to their problem.
Yeah.
That's another big one. Get our chief information security officer in, and it's suddenly their problem as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess thinking about smaller organisations that might not be able to, you know, have budget for a CISO, that this very much becomes the CIO's responsibility.
And that's what it was like at uni, and that's basically where we use third parties a lot and help us, you know, partner with us to give us that, you know, advice, protection, you know, hard on the inside, and also even harder on the outside. So it's, you know, make yourself more difficult. But yeah, it's a real threat. It's something I think, I can't remember where I read it, but the number of, you know, attacks is going up. It's just, that's nature of the law. I don't think the UK is as popular as it once was elsewhere. So we're up there as a possible, you know, attack.
Yeah. You've talked a lot about having the right people around you and the right team, and you're not always going to be the smartest person in the room, but, you know, surround yourself with really good people. And you also said about not judging people too quickly, to really realise what people can achieve and help and deliver. What are the benefits that you've seen of having a diverse team?
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen kind of real benefits back to the business from making sure you know your team or workforce is kind of diverse and inclusive in all measures?
Yeah, and there's some obvious things that spring to mind. If I think about, I don't know, I'll say Asda. I'm probably not your average Asda customer. You know, income-wise, probably not the persona that would shop in Asda. But having a voice at various levels of the organisation that can talk about what we're trying to do and hear what they would say and would it impact them, I think is key. But I think you need to have diverse thought and input from both race, gender, because we don't, you know, you rightly or wrongly, you inherently make decisions on your experience and how you know, what you've experienced and what you've seen and what you do. So by having people with different experience, having people with different backgrounds, and having people with different views is only going to enrich the conversation or enrich the decision making. Ultimately, you make a decision on, you know, information at hand, but if you can make that information at hand so much more powerful and so insightful, you're only going to succeed. That's the benefit, and part of that is that diverse workforce and team around you, because everybody brings something different to the table. Generations are, you know, I talk about it now. It's like, I have a different view, and I'll be 50 this year. Somebody that sits around my table in maybe their mid-20s is going to have a completely different view than I do. It's just as valid, it's just as insightful, it's just another information source. And we all talk about now data's become massive, you know, everything's data-led. People are data at the end of the day. It's like, you're going to trust a spreadsheet, you're going to trust a data warehouse, and you're going to trust BI, and everybody's pulling all this insight and analytical information. The guy sat next to you, the girl sat across from you, that's just data in their heads. It's just like, how do you get that out to help you make decisions? So I've always been keen to do that, and everywhere I've worked is have that opportunity to have that, you know, diverse workforce. And that doesn't necessarily mean male, female, you know, ethnic background, whatever. It's just people with different experiences, different backgrounds, who can give you a different viewpoint, and that helps.
And do you think it's more difficult for an organisation to get those benefits from a diverse workforce, from all those different experiences, and when people are working remotely? Do you think that makes it more challenging, kind of?
I think it does, because I think what happens is, rightly or wrongly, you become more formal. So if you're doing everything remotely, the old chit chat, you know, the normal bit of getting to know you, and just that 5 minutes of banter, right, that you would normally have if you walk into a meeting room and everybody's in there, you're usually just chatting away. as you wait for latecomers to come, because there's always somebody's late, so you're always having a chat. Whereas when you're on like sort of Zoom or Teams or whatever, you kind of go straight into the details straight off the bat, and you don't have that little conversation that might unlock a little bit of a nugget. And I do think that's one of the pitfalls of the remoteness that you don't get, but also that just general hearing people talk. You know, it's the old water cooler moment. Used to, you know, people used to get a coffee. You have different conversations about what's going on. Or people easier to grab you for 5 minutes because they'll come and desk hop you, sit at the end of your desk and ask you a question. And then just by having a question asked and you having that conversation, it fires your own thought process. It's little things are sparking off that makes you think differently. Where but you know, I'm not saying it's like the be all and end all, but I do think it is slightly missing now. Because you don't know what you don't know, and you don't necessarily know what to ask for if you don't know. But having a conversation with somebody, it's amazing what something will pop up. No, oh, did you hear so and so's happening, or did you hear there was a delay on X, or so implementation wasn't like quite right like it should have done, or finance are having a hell of a problem with the systems, and it's like, oh right, why? Oh right, you start thinking about what's going on. So yeah, I do think that's a slight impact. Yeah.
And looking ahead then, obviously exciting times joining Marks and Spencer's. What are your top 3 priorities for the first 12 months when you land?
I'll caveat this, that might change once I land.
I was going to say, do you know yet? But what do you think they're going to be then?
Well, if I do my personal ones, because hopefully they don't change too much, is going back to what we said before, is understanding the business. I'm so looking forward to getting the time, and they've instigated this, so hats off to them, is spending time with our store colleagues and our depots and our head offices and understanding how the business ticks and works, and getting that feel for who the M&S customer is, what the persona is, what, you know, is there 2, 3, 4 different personas they target, and then really get to understand the makeup of what we're trying to, you know, like basically sell to, and then as part of that, it's also understanding products for me as my colleagues, who I'll be working with, who they are, going back to what I said before, is don't judge whoever they are just by me. It's like really get to know them, your family, friends, what do they do outside work, what makes them tick, and use that opportunity to start, you know, connecting at a human level to start with, because I've always found if you've got at least a connection and an ability to talk to them and they trust you, when times are hard, you get more out of them and people are willing to go shoulder to shoulder with you. When you don't really know who it is and it's hard to call on people to ask them to go the extra mile when you don't really know them. So that, understanding the business, understanding people, definitely up there. And then understanding the portfolio and what they want to achieve, you know, what is the business strategy, where are they going? I mean, I'm fortunate I'm joining them when they're absolutely, you know, on the turn and absolutely flying. So that'll be great experience joining a, you know, a business on the up and really going fast. But as I say, understanding what the strategy is, where they want to go in the next 2 or 3 years, how then I can bring in that competitive advantage, what tech can do to help, and then really understanding the business as well, what their challenges are. So spending time with the senior individuals in the business to say, right, what is it? What is your biggest challenge? What's the thing that, again, a lesson I learned from another great boss was, you'll be surprised how many C-suite people will tell you it's not the ERP implementation that's giving them headaches, it's the fact that their laptops are running dog slow. Right? You don't get that unless you ask them, you know, and it's those little things, the little wins gives you the air cover when things aren't necessarily going that well. So again, it's these little things you pick up as you go along that you go, right, that's what can I do to make these little things a wee bit easier for you.
Yeah. Do you want to throw your laptop out the window? Should be a good opening question to everyone you meet.
Exactly. Well, I'm always worried about when you go, when is it, are you Microsoft or are you Apple? What are we actually going to deal with here? How do you work?
Yeah, absolutely. And just thinking about some of the people that will be watching today, hopefully are aspiring CIOs, you know, in those head of roles, really looking for that next step up and think about how they might carve their way to get there. What advice would you give to anybody here who was looking to achieve that kind of C-level role within technology?
Be authentic, be you. Now, at the end of the day, if you can be you, it doesn't matter what goes on around you. You know your default's you, so you're not trying to be somebody you're not. So when the pressure's on, you don't have to, you know, contend with that. Don't think about imposter syndrome. Honestly, if somebody said to me well, when I was in my 20s, I would be, you know, CTO, M&S, I'd be laughing in their face. Not me, no way. That's not a role I'd ever be able to do. But it's amazing. Again, it's just a job, and you learn on the job, and you learn your way up to do it. So I would say, don't worry about imposter syndrome. It's all about believing yourself. If you want to do it, you probably can do it. It's just do it, you know, go for it. And then I guess I've touched on this as well, is like, don't be afraid to make decisions. As long as you can prove and evidence your decision tree, nobody can really shout at you or tell you got it wrong, because you can point to, yeah, I want to do this because of that. Mm-hmm. What part of that did I get wrong? Oh, right, okay, they did. It was just based on maybe too many assumptions, and the assumptions weren't right, so therefore the decision was the right decision. But at least you can show that thought process. You learn from it, you can take it away and factor in next time. And then again, they'll don't be afraid to make mistakes. Again, that comes into it as I'm not overly saying this, but I guess I am. Is sometimes I think it's good to seek forgiveness rather than ask for permission. I think it's like, if you really believe it and you trust it and you trust your instinct, trust your decision making, I think there's a lot to be said about make the decision and be bold and go for it. And then, you know, if it, God forbid, it wasn't the right decision, you ask for forgiveness, but you can show why you made that decision. Again, going back to the decision tree and all that sort of stuff. I think people nowadays, and again, I guess I was very lucky that as long as I could articulate why I did something, I got support, even if it was right or wrong. I think some people nowadays are scared of failure. You know, they think it'll knock the career or knock them back a few months or years because they maybe did something that wasn't great. I'd say the opposite. That's battle scars. That's where you learn from. You know, I would always happily hire somebody with experience who's gone through harder times, that things haven't gone as well, as much as I'd be more concerned if everything somebody ever did was always good and never had the failure. Because I'm like, well, what are you going to bring to me when it does go wrong? Where's that resilience?
Great advice. I feel like I need to edit that bit and be able to use it as our little interview prep for anybody going for a kind of leadership role. Listen to Jock. Don't listen to me. Listen to Jock Carruthers. Yeah. Final question, and we ask every one of our guests to leave a question for our next guest. And this question came from Anthony Horsdorfer, who is the CIO at the AA. And Anthony has asked you, how do you ensure that the CIO and technology team are supporting the business and achieving its ESG commitments?
Okay. First off, understand what your business is. So if I say Uni Pizza Ovens, it's probably not first and foremost people going to say ESG, because you're ultimately burning things, you know, you're cooking things. And we're manufacturing metal, sheet metal, making them into ovens, etc. But that said, you understand what you're doing. It's about being better than what you are at your worst. And therefore, what can you do to make, and I'm not saying offset, but it should be more than offset. It should be you're doing more. So things in technology could be, you know, you'll go into, I don't know, software as a service. When you start looking at the big platforms, when you're making your choices, who you're going to deal with, what are they doing on their ESG credentials? You know, have they got the data centers at the bottom of the sea, so they're not, you know, doing cooling as much? And I think that is critical, because I don't think you can change the business model per se, but I think it's about what can you do through your technology choices that enhances and does more good than bad. Basically, what you're doing or what the business is doing, you're trying to make it better. That would be, God, that was a good question.
It was a good question.
That was a good question. Hopefully, I've sort of answered that. I don't think. Yeah, I would basically say understand what the business is. Essentially, who you work for, what do they do. You're never going to really change what they do, but if you can find ways to make offset bad bits and make it even better, then you're helping from that credential. And then there's the modern workplace, you know, there's the modern slavery, or understand what ESG in totality is, and then you can, because it's not always about carbon footprint, etc. There's loads to it that you need to look at and look towards. Yeah, that would be it.
Good answer. That's amazing. You've got constraints of what the business does, but you've got to, it's hard to kind of not work within those. So you've got to look at other ways your supply chain is a really good way of doing it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Jock, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for chatting to me today, and it's been a really good opportunity to learn about your career into becoming a CIO and CTO, and best of luck with everything at Marks and Spencer's.